The Teamsters were formed in 1903, and back then they weren't even driving trucks yet. These are horse and buggy guys, but it was formed to help them fight for better wages, and basically they were fighting the huge corporation grocery chains. And they were successful in their fight, and they won better wages. The problem with them was back then that their winning different fights and strikes was marred by violence, and that violent perception of the Teamsters stayed with their public image, and it hurt them. This video is sponsored by Driving Tests. In spite of their public image, the Teamsters driving jobs became some of the best driving jobs in the trucking industry back then. And back in 1957, when Jimmy Hoffa took power, from 1957 to 67, the Teamsters Union flourished, and they made some of the best money in trucking. Unfortunately, in 1967, Hoffa was charged with corruption, and basically what he was doing was stealing money out of the Teamsters pension fund and loaning it or gifting it to the mafia. So he went to jail, and after that, after 1967, the Teamsters' bargaining power and reputation started to slide down. Corporations and carriers were fighting hard to get rid of the Teamsters because they didn't want to pay them the extra money. So since 67, basically the Teamsters Union has been on a downhill slide. Now, part of the problem with the Teamsters for the last number of years is that they have been suffering under weak leadership of guys like Jimmy Hoffa Jr. But now they've got a new guy in charge. His name is Sean O'Brien. He's a powerful figure. He's organizing and strengthening the union, and he's after Yellow Freight and UPS. He's demanding better wages for his drivers, and both Yellow and UPS are trembling because this guy's got the pull to pull the strike pin and shut both companies down. Driving Tests has developed an online program to help you get your ELDT certification and help you pass your CDL written exam. Driving Test is certified by the FMCSA and is recognized as the best online driver training course for getting your CDL. Check them out at drivingtest.org. I myself was a Teamster for about a year starting in 1983, so I am familiar with the pros and the cons of being a Teamster. The pros, the first is that the company drivers make better money than the average truck driver does out there every day, and they have a pension plan. And pension plans, real pension plans, are rare as hen's teeth among truck drivers anymore. So they were two big advantages: more money and a pension plan. The cons that I found were, number one, they ran junk equipment. Now, the carrier I worked for was buying junk equipment because they were so mad at having to pay the drivers extra money that they cheaped out on the equipment. And the trucks that we ran had no insulation up here in the wintertime, so they were cold as hell. You had to drive in a snowmobile suit. And number two, they were so cheap, they didn't even have fuel gauges. We had to dip the fuel tanks with a stick, and they didn't even provide the stick. The second problem I found with being a Teamster was their seniority setup. Now, I certainly recognize that seniority should bring you some perks. There was value in seniority, but not the way they worked it. What would happen with the Teamsters carrier that I was working for was they all called each other brother. But when the freight was really slow, the brothers became your enemies, because when the freight was really slow, the senior drivers would take all the good loads coming in. They'd take all the loads that were coming in, and the junior drivers would sit home and starve. Then, when the weather turned really bad up here, the senior drivers would all refuse to go out in a bad storm, and they would force the junior drivers out onto the road in the storm because the senior guys wouldn't go. And if the junior drivers refused, they would face dismissal. I left that carrier after about a year because the truck that they had assigned to me, the steering box was starting to go out of it, and I refused to drive it. I didn't feel it was safe. They decided I was wrong. They put another driver in that truck and it carried on. Then the steering box failed altogether. The truck lost control. The driver crashed into a rock face and was killed. That old truck was an old cab-over Freightliner, and it was a piece of junk. Now, happily today, the the DOT doesn't let carriers get away with that anymore. The equipment can't be junk, or the DOT just catches it right on the road. So that problem with the Teamsters equipment has been solved. Generally, it might not be pretty equipment, but it'll be mechanically sound. So these days, it's only really the seniority issue that is a negative aspect of Teamster jobs, in my opinion. Now, today, with the Teamsters pressure with Yellow Freight or YRC, what they're trying to do now is Yellow wants to consolidate the company, shrink it down, make it a more profitable, get rid of some terminals. And how the seniority issue will affect that is, if Yellow loses these terminals, some of these drivers will lose their jobs, not because they were better or worse at their job than any of the other drivers. It'll be purely seniority. And it doesn't much matter anything else other than seniority. And it doesn't matter if these guys have been with Yellow a dozen years or more. It's all based on seniority, and I don't think that's fair. However, bottom line here today is, if you can deal with the seniority issues of the Teamsters, really, it's a very good job to have. Most carriers out there today, and I say most, do not pay their drivers enough to keep up with the cost of living. The Teamsters ensure that their members are paid up to snuff with the cost of living increases, and that's a huge advantage these days. The Teamsters still have a really good pension plan to this day. Now, bear in mind that the trucking industry is always changing, and you've got to keep up with those changes because you want to keep making the best money possible. Now, 20 years ago, if you had asked me if I would have recommended drivers join the Teamsters Union, I would have said no. But the industry has changed, the economy has changed, and the Teamsters once again have changed, and now they're more powerful. Today, I would recommend a Teamster driving job if you can find one, or at least you should do is have a look around to see if you can find one that you'd be interested in, because it is a good position to have at the end of the day with the right carrier. So that's my take on it, but I'm interested in what you think. Let me know if you came across a good Teamster position today, would you take it? I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, keep the rubber side down, and I'll see you on the backhaul.